So, again, my name is Taino Palermo. Welcome to day 2 of our annual gathering. And we did a lot of talking about these folks yesterday, and now we get to hear directly from them. Just a little story time, if you will. I want to get a live stream, but I am here live stream. So, one of my elders, ʻāina, who she's listening, I hope she is, was on a panel, I believe. It was a panel discussion with Dr. Lani Cupchoy, who we'll hear from shortly. They'll all introduce themselves. And Lani was telling her in this panel about the land issues in Maui, in Hawaii. And they needed support, they needed legal support, they needed help. And my mother, being who she is, signed me up, unbeknownst to me. And me being who I have to be, said absolutely, whatever you need. And then we had a conversation. I think we had the first Zoom call. And before that Zoom call, Lani shared with me a snippet of a forthcoming documentary, which she'll talk more about as well, about this land dispossession. And so it resonated with me, obviously, because of the work we're doing here with East Coast tribal communities and our Caribbean families. And so it was a no-brainer. It's just we didn't know anything about Hawaii. And so we had to learn, and we did. And one of the first things we did was reach out to somebody, our own network, one of which was Attorney Andy Reed, who just wrapped up his session on the Onondaga Nation versus the United States. He's representing the Onondaga Nation at the Inter-American Human Rights Court. And so Andy was like, well, I know a couple people, one of which his name is Diego. He's a young guy, he went to law school not so long ago, started practicing. He's from there, he knows those people, he knows those families, he knows the culture, and he's cut from the same cloth. And so you know Andy, you know me, you know Ray, you know what cut from the same cloth means. And so we met Diego, and we met Diego on a road tour, so to speak, virtually via Zoom, of all the who's who in Hawaii. And at least involved in this work and doing this work. We met, connected with attorneys, other elders, other activists, and we spent a better part of about a year and a half getting to know each other, feeling each other out, making sure this was a good working relationship. And then us just being who we are, we were like, all right, so we'll represent that. And then we were like, wait, we can't transfer it to Hawaii. And it's because we don't know kingdom law. And we don't even know any state in the union that practices kingdom law. And so we had to learn kingdom law. And luckily for us, but unfortunately for our friends here, they had to learn all this on their own and became de facto attorneys and taught us a lot about kingdom law. And they still teach us a lot about kingdom law. And so, where the other gaps are in law, we can fill. And so we knew we needed someone on the ground there. And that's where Diego came in, and we were able to engage Diego. He's our local attorney there. There is muscle from afar. And this is the culmination of what a year-ish of due diligence, trust building has culminated to. And so we wanted to present our family from afar here collectively for the whole group. After this, the afternoon breakout session, there'll be a part 2 to this to go even deeper for those who stay in this space, or the other workshops. But this is just so, if you get your appetite fed here, you continue to eat after lunch with, another panel with more families being affected by this work. And so this is more reason to support the center. I'm bringing it all weekend to donate, support, help, tell a friend, and so we can continue to do this work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kahala, who will walk us through, give us some background and we'll hear from each of the panelists. We'll hear each of their stories, and then we have a little time to do a little Q&A. But they're going to be here in the space all weekend. And so, you know, if you don't want to ask a question on stage, so to speak, definitely track them down and find them in between each session. So, let's turn it over to you.
Mahalo Taino. Everyone can hear me? All good and back? All right. Aloha mai kako. Before we begin, I just want to let us hold space for one of our elders who's experiencing some health issues, and so I'd like to call on his ancestors to come in and bring healing to him. Na'omakua. Na'omakua mai ka lahiki a ka lākau, mai ka ho'oku ia ka halawai. Na'omakua ia ka hina alo, ia a ka akau I ka lani. O ki ha I ka lani, o e I ka lani, unulu I ka lani, ka olo I ka lani. E a ka pula pula o kou, ka maunua niho. E malama o kou ia mākou. E ulu I ka lani, e ulu I ka honua, e ulu I ka pai ʻāina o Hawaiʻi. E ho mai ka ike, e ho mai ka ikaika, e ho mai ki aka mai, e ho mai ka maopo popono, e ho mai ka ike pāpālua, e ho mai ka mana. All right. Again, I really appreciate everyone for coming to our panel discussion today. This is family I've grown to know and love. It's me, my mom, Lani, who's our ohana, our hanai, Kāne Aliʻi, and Diego, who is our representing lawyer. All of these folks are comrades and family, our ohana, and I really appreciate being here today to be able to speak alongside them. All right. I'll be giving, I'm in charge of probably the most unenviable position on this panel. I will be attempting to give 150 years of our people's history as legal and political context within 15 minutes. So pray for me, pray your ancestors for me. We'll be trying to get through this today. My name is Kahala Johnson. I'm from Kānaka Maoli. I'm currently the co-director of Maui Medic Healers Hui, which is an organization of street medics, Indigenous BIPOC folks who have been founded in the aftermath of the Lahaina fires last year, which devastated the town of Lahaina. As a hui, the Maui Medics is dedicated to helping to heal the trauma, not just from the fires, but from the many years of plantation colonialism and U.S. occupation that our people have experienced. I hold a PhD in political science and Indigenous politics and alternative futures from the UH Manoa. I approach these issues as a scholar, but also as someone, as an activist who is attempting to help our family recover our lands, reoccupy our lands within what we are going to be explaining today is the U.S. occupation of Hawaii. So again, I'll be providing a historical and legal overview of the Hawaiian Kingdom's transition into a recognized sovereign nation state, the illegal overthrow that occurred in 1893, the U.S. occupation which followed, and the contested myth of annexation. This will include as well a breakdown of the mahele, which was the land redistribution that our chiefs did in order to protect our claims to our ʻāina, our land. And I'll also be looking at some of the legal frameworks which continue to shape contemporary struggles over land and jurisdiction within Hawaii today. This context is essential for understanding the political terrain in which the panel's cases unfold. Whether we're discussing contested titles, land use, or cultural protections, these cases don't occur in a vacuum. They're part of a longer genealogy of occupation and resistance in which Hawaiian law, international law, Indigenous, Indian law, and US law all intersect, often in contradictory and uneven ways. My goal is to provide a foundation that can help illuminate not only how we got here, but also how we might think about critically where we're going next. And we'll be throwing some words out here. This is just to create a little bit more accessibility for our language. We'll be talking about ʻāina, which is land, vai, which is our water, Kāna Aliʻi, rooted in water, which is our word for law, Kāna Aliʻi, Palapala, which is our land titles and documentation, and kuleana, which is our right, responsibilities, and interests. All right, let's get into this. So in the early 19th century, the Hawaiian Islands underwent a rapid period of political unification, cultural adaptation, and diplomatic engagement with the outside world. Under the leadership of one of our first kings, King Kamehameha I, the islands were unified in 1810 into a single kingdom. After his passing, his successors, including his sons, Kamehameha II and Kamehameha III, faced increasing contact with foreign powers, including the United States, Britain, France, and other imperialist countries within the Pacific. By the 1830s and the 1840s, the Hawaiian Kingdom was facing growing pressures, including foreign land claims, religious conflict, and threats of annexation. In response, King Kamehameha III, known as Kauikioli, and his advisors, one of our elders, Timoteo Ha'alilio, they worked together to modernize the Hawaiian government along Western lines in order to ensure our survival and recognition. This modernization included establishing a constitutional monarchy and the first Hawaiian constitution in 1840, creating formal executive, judicial, and legislative branches of the government, and promoting diplomatic missions to secure international treaties with other countries. And on that note, one of the most significant developments was the diplomatic mission of 1842 to 1843, which was led by our elder, Timoteo Ha'alilio. And his mission was to seek formal sovereign recognition of Hawaii's independence. And so on November 28th, 1843, through Ha'alilio's efforts, both Great Britain and France signed what's called the Anglo-Franco Proclamation, which officially recognized the Hawaiian Kingdom as an independent sovereign nation state. This was a groundbreaking achievement. Hawaii became one of the first non-European states in the world to be recognized as fully sovereign under international law. Over the next several decades, the Hawaiian Kingdom maintained its formal diplomatic relations with over 90 countries, including treaties of peace, friendship, and commerce with major powers. It established embassies and consulates around the world, including within the United States, and had international delegates in Honolulu. All right. So part of the reason why we became a sovereign nation state was to protect our people and our country, our government, from the invasion of foreign imperial powers. And so I'm going to be talking now a little bit about another strategy to protect not just our government, not just our political life, but also our connections to land, which is called the Mahele. The Mahele, which took place in 1848, was a major land division in the Hawaiian Kingdom, which transformed how land was managed and owned. Before the Mahele, land in Hawaii was held communally under a traditional system where our chiefs, priests, land stewards, and the common class all played roles within taking care of our ʻāina, our land. Land wasn't owned in the Western sense, but it was shared according to genealogical, social, and ecological relationships. By the mid-1800s, there was increasing influence from foreign governments, missionaries, and business interests. And so the Hawaiian Kingdom began to transition toward a private property model. And so we have here under the chieftaincy kind of a tripartite division of chiefs, land stewards, and commoners. And although there's a hierarchy there was also an understanding that we're all related. And so there was a reciprocal taking care of each other and the land that was part of our traditional land tenure. Through the Mahele, this shifted a bit and began to hybridize with Western systems. The Mahele was a process of having different groups of Kānaka Maoli being able to lay claim to their land. And how you did that was you as a claimant would be able to go to the Bureau of Conveyance and you would have to provide a land survey and testimony from a native subject as well as a foreign subject. At the Bureau of Conveyances, they would evaluate your claims. You would have to pay a commutation fee, And what that did was that extinguished the rights of the other classes, the chiefs, the priests, the land stewards within your claim. And after you kind of quieted that title, you would then be awarded what's called a Land Commission Award and eventually a royal patent. And these are, they're really important documents, but I like to think of them as receipts that you underwent the mahele, you submitted the correct documentation, and now you have evidence of those claims. And so after the mahele, our land tenure system began to change under the new monarchy in the Hawaiian Kingdom. And now you had four main groups that were represented in terms of land claims. The crown and its lands, its claims, which belong to the position of the throne. You also had government and public lands. And then you also had the continuation of chief and land stewards and their claims to land, who would get land commission awards and royal patents. But you also had, of course, the kind of the first time actually where the commoners had a stake in being able to solidify their claims to land. And so with these four groups claiming title, claiming land commission awards, claiming royal patents, the Great Mahele was there to provide yet another way, in addition to having a sovereign state, to be able to provide evidence and title for those who are claiming lands, Kānaka Maoli in particular, to be protected from foreign accumulation. Yeah. All right. And so just to kind of review this section, in addition to the state, the mahele was a way to prevent foreign control of property in Hawaii by continuing to maintain the Kānaka Maoli connections to land within a new system of private property, but still honoring our communal and reciprocal relations to each other. In this next section, I'll be talking about probably the most, I guess, controversial outside of Hawaii, but one of the most controversial claims that Dr. David Kianusai and his research has provided. And that is the Noheva, or U.S. occupation and colonization of Hawaii. So from 1843 to about the late 19th century, Hawaii functioned as a fully independent country under international law with our own flag, currency, passports, and constitution. This sovereignty was maintained until the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom in 1893, which began a new chapter of struggle for self-determination that continues today. In January 1893, the Hawaiian Kingdom was overthrown in a coup led by a small group of mostly American and European businessmen, many of whom were connected to sugar plantation and shipping interests. This group called themselves the Committee of Safety, and they were supported by U.S. Minister and Diplomat to Hawaii, John L. Stevens. On January 16th, 1893, John L. Stevens called U.S. Marines from the USS Boston, and he landed them on Honolulu in abrogation of our Treaty of Peace with the United States and in violation of international law. On the next day, January 17th, 1893, the Committee of Safety declared the establishment of a provisional government overthrowing the Hawaiian Kingdom, or the Queen, and enacted a new law and order illegally. Queen Liliuokalani, facing threats of armed resistance and conflict and potential civilian casualties, she temporarily yielded her authority under protest and trusted that the United States would reverse this illegal occupation called by Minister Stevens. In response to the Queen's appeal, President Grover Cleveland at the time, he launched an investigation and he found that the overthrow was illegal. And he concluded that the U.S. Military forces were directly involved in illegal international coup and called for their withdrawal. He actually made an executive order, very popular, those things today. However, the provisional government refused to abide by President Cleveland's demands, and instead they basically delayed the time and kept this hope for Hawaii's annexation to the United States within Congress, yeah, or amongst themselves. So in 1898, the Spanish-American War began, and the U.S. formally claimed Hawaii through what's known as a joint resolution of Congress, which we call the New Lands Resolution. This move is seen as what annexed Hawaii to the United States, but for those of you who are familiar with international law, a joint resolution of Congress cannot acquire the sovereignty of another country. Knock on wood, might be tested today in the present again. But this new lands resolution was basically Congress saying we're going to annex Britain or France, extending U.S. domestic power over an international entity. Again, this new lands resolution was not a treaty. It was not a treaty of annexation. It did not cede sovereignty, neither did it acquire sovereignty from the Hawaiian Kingdom. Nonetheless, the president at the time, President McKinley, passed this as a way to annex Hawaii under the guise of the Spanish-American War, stating that this archipelago was necessary to the security and necessary to the war efforts, and thereby claimed Hawaii through annexation, as well as the Philippines, Borican, Guahan, right? We know this territorial colonial history very well. And so this created what's called the myth of annexation. Many of us, I grew up with thinking of Hawaii as the 50th state. My kupuna did, and our elders before. This history had to be uncovered for us through the efforts of many scholars, both legal, political, but also grassroots activists. And so this myth of annexation, which states that Hawaii became a state, was annexed, began to be undone within about the 1970s, where we had our scholars like Haunani K. Trask, who began to work with Black Panthers, AIM, Young Lords, began to introduce incrementalism, always different conscientisms to the Hawaiian people. And as we began to become more conscious of our political and legal history, we got angry. Our aloha became what's called kuhu. It became righteous, justified anger. And we began what's known as the modern Hawaiian sovereignty movement, which has continued today through, as many of you know, protests on Mauna Kea, the needs to stop the bombing at Koho'olave, one of our sacred islands. And it's the reason why you have folks here today sitting before you, being able to talk about the mahele and our claims to land. Yes, and so as we dispel this myth of annexation, as we begin to reclaim our sovereignty and reclaim our land, we are fighting against this very difficult situation legally, very confusing. It's a labyrinth of law, one that involves at least 3 layers: international law, see up on top, U.S. law under an occupation, a prolonged and belligerent occupation, and then lastly, Hawaiian Kingdom law, which we are beginning to study and become street activists, grassroots lawyers, learning the law that our kupuna, our elders, set down. Some of our strategies include what we're doing now, working with other allies and comrades to be able to bring our cases forward to other arenas. It involves physically reoccupying our lands, creating camps on the land, similar to as we saw in Standing Rock and Ihumatao in New Zealand. It also involves teaching others about what Hawaiian Kingdom jurisdiction looks like, what the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom are. And it's also being able to claim our lands through Land Commission awards and royal patents, which continue to be passed down to our families today. And so today you'll be hearing from 3 different cases. The first is Kuhimana, which are lands, sand dunes, really, which my mom will be talking about, where the iwi, the bones of our ancestors lie in that land. And she'll be talking about resisting the nonprofit industrial complex on Maui to be able to do that. We'll also be hearing from Kāne Aliʻi about East Kuiaha, which is also on Maui, and his fight to protect the wai, the water, which has been taken and controlled by the plantation system for hundreds of years. We recently ended the plantation era in 2016. Yeah. And then we'll also be hearing from Lani and her case at Aleamai, which she'll be talking about dispossession and the use of leasing as dispossession, a way to dispossess our elders and our people today. And so, in summary, once again, that was a lot, I know. This is like a Hawaiian 101. I'm smashing it into 15 minutes. But Summary, the Hawaiian Kingdom is an internationally recognized sovereign nation state, and it continues to experience ongoing U.S. occupation and settler colonialism. 2, the mehele, which was a land tenure system that transitioned our traditional land tenure to private property. This helped to distribute the land to the different classes of Kānaka Maoli while also preserving our land claims. It was a defense strategy against invasion. And lastly, that Kānaka Maoli, like ourselves, are engaging in a diversity of legal strategies at the county, state, federal level, but also with our Indian cousins, kingdom, and international laws, all in order to secure our sovereignty and fight for our liberation. Mahalo.
All right, so can you hear me? Perfect. So like Paula said, I'm his mom. Yeah, so I get to change it up a little bit, right? Because he get to speak that way because I helped him, or not, I didn't really help him. He really helped himself to go to school. So he got his PhD, which I am very proud of and I'm very grateful for, because he is a Christian, a first generation, so I appreciate that. But also, not just that, I wanted to start off, we're going to do something different. I'm going to say aloha, yeah, which means love. And I have a lot of that today, especially to share with you. So I'm going to go ahead and say aloha, and you're going to say it back to me. So after I say it, you say it back to me. Okay, here we go. Aloha. How did that feel? Did that feel a little bit better? Yeah, it helped me too, because I have a lot to share with you, and I have to do this within 15 minutes. And he did a great job, so I'm going to try my best, because I'm the one that talks a lot. Okay, so today we're going to go, and I'm going to share a story, because since you all never been in the place that we are fighting for, well, let me ask, how many of you have been to Hawaii? Okay, so I'm going to take you back. For those of you that have not, you get to feel this place with us. And it's good to be connected as we tell our story, so then that way you can feel what we felt and how we felt. So this is a story that we're going to take with you to our ancestral land in Wai'ehu, which is called Kuhimana, which is a portion of the land that our tutus, or as we say, our ancestors, walk the land. It is a rich history and a cultural significance. As he spoke about the Land Commission Award, it has a name that's attached to it. Our name is Pequot. He is our tutu, for the 4th great-grandfather. So this is how we trace back to our great-great-great-great-grandfather who received that Land Commission Award. So we are asserting our constitutional, the Kanawai, which is a privilege to practice and protect our traditional and customary Kānaka Maoli rights by celebrating our ancestors by song, by dance, by chants, as well as giving offerings and prayers at the ahulele, which is like an altar honoring the heavens, tending to, cultivating, and gathering la'au lapa'au, which is medicinal plants for healing, and especially the kalo, which is it's a staple food that we eat a lot of and that we plant, and also we do burial blessings to our kupuna iwi, which is the bones of our ancestors on the land and on our ʻāina. The land that you see here is a slither. It's a slither of, or portion of our land division, as we call it, the ahopua. On the left side of the roadway, as you can see, towards the Mauka, which is the mountains where our aquifer is preserved, but used and also abused by developers to divert it. To the far right, after the development as you see it, where there's the development that is built upon the sand dunes. So just imagine a development of houses on sand dunes where we buried our iwi, which is our bones, our ancestors. And they came there and they built there. I was a little girl at that time, but my uncle, my great uncle, he was the one that fought for that and told them not to build, but they didn't listen to him. And they went ahead and they still built it. But if you look to the far, far right side of it, there is a little land or a slither of land also near the ocean, which is a wetland that we continue to preserve for its purpose. in this land division that our ancestors managed and cared for. We will walk through the events that led to our displacement, examine the illegal maneuvers involved, and discuss the controversial transfer of title that has left many of us questioning its legitimacy. Next. So, upon occupying ancestral land, as you can see, our ohana. So this is our family. This is where we gather, we enjoy, we collaborate, we take responsibility in our duties. We even have what we call a code of conduct. We have talk story sessions. We talk about the code of conduct. We do family counseling, practicing consent, and also having respect for each other. So it's pretty much like what a council, a family council is. Go ahead, next. One more time. So this is where we all kind of hung out. So we're going to go ahead and talk about protecting our lands. So as we were enjoying ourselves on the ʻāina, and we did what we were told to do and to practice our cultural rights. Next. Lo and behold, we were abruptly removed by the Maui Police Department along with a private security company that was hired by our predecessor, MEO Maui Economic Opportunity, who claims to own the land in the act of stealing private property. Next. So simultaneously, heinous acts of harassment, discrimination, which led to false arrests, which resulted in no charges being filed against the heirs, and the release of the individuals whose actions caused unnecessary trauma to the individuals involved. The person that you see here, that was getting arrested, her name was also Laura, which is my colonized name, by the way. She was wrongfully arrested. She was also from an Indian tribe, and she was displaced somewhere else. And what had happened was we had a family council, and we all consented that she come onto our land where she could stay with her partner, and she was able to enjoy our land as well and helping to protect it and to preserve it. But she was the one that got arrested. So, let's see, next. So the heirs filed multiple individual complaints to the police commission, 24 total. The representatives of all the heirs that were living in the ʻāina that were mistreated by police brutality that was performed by officers involved and reported by horrified witnesses of this illegal ejectment. The police commission to this day has not responded to any of the 24 complaints that were submitted, and no investigation into these actions have been pursued. Next. This person, his name is Frank Diego Jr. He was a previous chief of police, and he is also the current chair of the police commission, as well as a Maui Economic Opportunity Board member in the private sector as the Maui Native Hawaiian Chamber of Commerce. This creates a conflict of interest between the interests of the Maui Police Department and the interests of the community it pledges to serve. This action was carried out in support of a local nonprofit, and despite our connection to the land, we found ourselves treated as trespassers and labeled that sparked a legal battle we never expected. So as you can see, Frank Diego, he represented himself when we went to the police commission to do a hearing. He was the chair at the time, but he's also on the board of directors, which is with Maui Economic Opportunity, which is our predecessor.
Oppressor?
Oppressor. Yeah, let's just call them oppressors. So they were the ones that we fought against, who also wanted to claim the land. So he was in all these different roles, and also he had a relationship with the present Maui Police chief. Okay, next. So MEO's claim to the land is rooted in what is known as So MEO's claim to the land is rooted in what is known as the Luna Lilo Land Commission Award 8559B20. And this is by our king, Luna Lilo. According to their narrative, the chain of title can be traced back to an individual named Stanford Carr using a quitclaim deed, and the title was transferred to MEO as a gift, a move that immediately raised questions about its validity and fairness. Next. A quitclaim deed is a legal instrument that transfers any interest the grantor may have in property without any guarantees regarding clear title. This means that the recipient, in this case, MEO, receives the property as is, with no assurances that there are hidden claims or encumbrances. In our view, this method was used to obscure the true ownership of our ancestral land, whereas the Land Commission Award supersedes the quitclaim deed because of our linear descendancy. The transfer of the land under questionable circumstances is not an isolated incident. It echoes a history of exploitation dating back to the plantation days, a period marked by exploitative practices and the manipulation of land rights. Many believe that the exchange is fraudulent, a modern-day continuation of historical injustices. When we were taken to court on charges of trespassing, the outcome was disheartening. We were fined a mere $1, a symbolic penalty that underscored the imbalance of power in the proceedings. Meanwhile, MEO received what is known as a possessory title. This type of title, however, is not equivalent to a full and clear legal title. It offers only a tenuous claim to the land. And by the way, the court proceedings cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars and probably more because of the sweep they did without a writ from the judge to do what they did. In summary, the sequence of events from our peaceful occupation through the police intervention to the legal and historical maneuvers reveals a deeply controversial and, in many ways, unjust process. The use of a quitclaim deed, the reliance of an award with a dubious chain of title, and the outcome of the court case all contribute to the perception that our ancestral land was taken from us through a fraudulent exchange. As we reflect on these events, it is vital that we continue to question and seek justice for the integrity of our heritage and the rights of our community, our lahui, and our ohana as Kānaka Maoli. Mahalo.
Aloha kākou. Can you hear me? Okay. Aloha kākou. My name is Kāne Aliʻi. I'm one of many lineage descendants of Nalopi, who was my 5th great-grandfather on my mother's side, who was a Land Commission awardee in East Maui. In sharing about my family's rematriation to our ancestral kuleana lands and the direct action we engaged in beginning in May 2021, to reassert and protect our kuleana rights, I'd first like to share more about my ancestors' history in East Kuiaha. The land we have rematriated ourselves to is one of 5 kuleana parcels in East Kuiaha, for which our ancestor Nalopi had kuleana or responsibility over. Nalopi was one of the lesser-known examples in which a Land Commission award and world patent had been awarded to someone who was not a makainana or of the common folk, but rather of a family line that had been living in secrecy after 1819. As a native testimony and foreign testimony given on behalf of Nalopi by Kapihe, a name reminiscent of the last prophet under King Kamehameha I, these lands had been given to Nalopi by his own wife in the year of 1819 during the time of King Kamehameha. To better understand what that means, this little bit of mo'olelo or story contextualizes that it was during the time when the kapu system, the traditional social, religious, political system of sacred laws that governed the Hawaiian Islands, placing the responsibility of overseeing the lands to those of chiefly and or priestly rank, and the marital unions of sacred bloodlines, that system was still in full effect in 1819. What this means for my family is that there was a good amount of lands held in East Kuiaha by women of sacred rank under the kapu system, which in turn meant that the rank of her husband, my tutu Nalopi, was a proximal, if not comparable rank. As part of my family's rematriation to this particular kuleana parcel, which contains a documented po'alima, or the chief's taro patch, it has also been a journey of uncovering the mystery of who our ancestors were by relying on the hints written in the documents and the landscape of our ancestral lands left behind for us. Part of uncovering that mystery has been the process of holding our ground amidst attempts of harassment and intimidation, while physically uncovering the very land hidden beneath invasive grasses that are the remnants of the late 1800s sugar plantation era on Maui. That is the legacy of the once sugar corporation owner, now real estate corporation and largest landholder on Maui, Alexander and Baldwin, or A&B. A&B was one of the big 5 corporations that were directly involved in the illegal overthrow of the sovereign government of the Kingdom of Hawaii. Our presence back on our land is part of the larger legacy of resistance seeking to uncover just small fragments of the larger corporate and governmental cover-ups that have been occurring over the past 132 years of illegal occupation of our islands. In time, the international media platform Al Jazeera Plus came to Maui in December 2021 to do a short documentary of the early days of my family's journey back to our land and the fight for our kuleana water rights, along with several other kuleana land families in different parts of Maui. To learn more of the backstories, I encourage you all to watch that short documentary they produced titled How Big Sugar Stripped Hawaiians of Their Own Land and Water, that is publicly accessible on YouTube, as it highlights that this is a very pervasive issue on Maui. The most important thing to understand as far as my case is concerned is that who the specific entities are that are involved. So Alexander and Baldwin, A&B, was once the only owner of East Maui Irrigation, the corporation which monopolizes the water resources of East Maui through mass water diversions to agricultural farms in central Maui. These lands were once held under A&B, who sold 41,000 acres to Mahipono, an agricultural company owned by the Canadian government and that arrived to Maui in 2018 and is now 50% owner of EMI. Through the partnership between A&B and Mahipono and collaboration with the state government via the Department of Land and Natural Resources, the DLNR, the plantation legacy continues to operate on Maui against the rights of many of us kuleana land families who, by law, have superior water rights, as we are not required to obtain a permit to access the water, whereas they are required to get a permit. Having been raised by a federal investigative officer, I was taught by my mother to always document footage, photographs, and email communications. This has been one of the most critical skills in my family's process in building our case. I would monitor the stream and take footage of the different water levels, finding sometimes that when it would rain heavily, the amount of stream flow would remain the same, and at other times it would actually decrease. When our taro patches that you see here went dry, I would document. In September 2021, I made initial contact with Rebecca Alakai, a representative of the Commission on Water Resource Management that is under the DLNR, regarding the diversion of water from our stream. I had been told via email that there were no stream diversions upstream of our location. What I had not initially shared prior to that is I had been in contact with Mark Bott, the water resource manager at Mahipono. He had disclosed to me via email that there was at least one diversion upstream of my family's kuleana land parcel. I forwarded his email to Rebecca, and 2 days after Rebecca's initial email, all of a sudden there was 4 diversions upstream of our LCA, 2 of which were owned by EMI. The initial failure to disclose information was the early red flag indicating that there was a level of corruption occurring. Over the next 6 months or so, stream flow was not consistent to the trends of rainfall, and there was not enough water in the stream for our taro patches, solely to the point where the stream went completely dry. So, escalation tactics occurred where it was decided that since water was being diverted away from our LCA, water would be taken from the Lori Ditch, which you see in these videos. The Lori Ditch is one of the many ditches owned by EMI that diverts water from East Maui to Central Maui. The only thing about this ditch is that parts of it was built through our kuleana lands without consent from the heirs and done so via fraudulent documented transactions that occurred in the 1930s. Unlike the original allodial title of the royal patents, the state has created a process where they fabricate titles through what they call a land court application. It was through this process that my ancestors' LCA and royal patent numbers had been manipulated, the boundaries portrayed to be positioned further east beyond the true boundaries, and a small portion of those falsified boundaries were then claimed ownership of via deeds that are inconsistent in conveyance, such as the gender of the people in those documents. This process was a means for A&B to fabricate a title that would be protected by police power in order for the Lori Ditch to be constructed through our lands and also maintained by EMI. During that time in the 1930s, a concrete basin had been installed off the side of the cliff, leading into a pipe underneath the road, a road built through our lands by the territory of Hawaii without consent, and the pipe leading into our LCA parcel. So we documented water from the Lori Ditch being the only source of water servicing our taro patches. On October 6, 2022, one of Mahipono's other subsidiaries, MP East B LLC, has sent a notice of trespass to me, attempting to intimidate me from my family's land. In the notice, they provided information regarding their claim to title that was registered in the 1930s by the land court, not realizing that I was aware that the county records show that the title was deregistered in 2018. That is where they goofed, because I immediately flew over to Oahu to the land court to pull their records where all the history of that fraudulent activity is documented. I flew back to Maui the next morning, and I heard EMI workers up at the ditch. After scaling the cliff, I managed to capture the workers diminishing our access to water, thus violating state law. There had been propaganda going around that EMI and Mahipono had been operating in good faith as a response to accusations by many families on Maui for diverting stream water from kuleana lands. This was irrefutable evidence to counter that propaganda. They had been caught on camera disrupting water rights of kuleana taro farmers by blocking the only source where water was actively flowing at the time to service our taro patches. They had polluted the water with concrete and extinguished our access to water, violating the state water code. What they had not realized is that I patiently waited for 4 months for them to make that exact move and document them and further substantiate a 45-page complaint to the DLNR Commission on Water Resource Management, containing much of the documentation I showed you folks of email communications, the intakes, photographs, and all to trigger a site visit and investigation, among a few other demands I put. On December 8th, 2022, representatives from the DLNR came to do a site visit as part of their investigation, but if you ask me, it was very subpar. Some findings in their investigation was that they went to visit the diversion sites owned by EMI. The diversions supposedly were not active. But of course, that process requires them first to contact the property owner where the diversion site is on, set a date for the visit, and then make the visit, giving whoever is in charge of that diversion enough time to plan and adjust the diversion as needed, just in time for CIPR's visits, assuming that CIPR was operating in good faith to begin with and actually went. However, that's highly questionable. As part of the investigation, CIPR provided this map showing the location of our LCA circuit circled in red, and the East Kuyaha stream going upline in green to represent it as a non-perennial stream or seasonal. According to their mapping, it does not reach the Kaluanui ditch owned by EMI, which, so the Kaluanui ditch is on the top left. However, I've walked the stream because this is my video, and I've seen the diversion sites. This is footage of the Kaluanui ditch actively hoarding stream flow that belongs to East Kuyaha. For the upland of the Kaluanui ditch, which they have marked as a natural stream, marked the natural stream on their map as a ditch in yellow, is another interesting structure I have documentation of and which has also been excluded from the map that they provided to me. In this footage, we see active flow on the far right side. On the left are stones showing the natural stream bed. However, water is not coming from there. Instead, it's coming from an underground man-made tunnel system owned and operated by EMI. It takes about 10 minutes to walk from the entrance to another opening where water would also flow out. From what I found, there's 2 levels in the tunnel. During DLNR's initial visit, I had a friend serve as witness and take footage of me showing the same video to that DLNR agent, and I was inquiring about it. During the investigation, DLNR was fully aware of the footage and decided to exclude it from their investigation. The question is why? The answer leads us back to March 8th, 2021, about 3 months or so before our family returned back to our land. That day was the day right after I had first returned to reconnect to the Land Commission Award before we officially set and went. A major catastrophic flood occurred in Haiku, including in East Kuyaha and Kalpakalua. Mass amounts of water gushing out on the intersection of West Kuyaha Road and Hana Highway, which is one of the major highways. In order for all the water that you see in this video to come out like that, it first traveled through our family land. Not only did this occur in East Kuyaha, but it also happened in Kalpakalua as well. The Kalpakalua Reservoir, owned and operated by EMI, the same people, had overtopped. The flooding caused mass property damages, yet it was treated as a supposed natural disaster by government officials and EMI, claiming that the reservoir was supposedly empty prior to the rains, and that supposedly 68 million gallons of water managed to fall from the sky in just a few hours to fill the reservoir, and then some to overtop it and cause the flooding. So why did DLNR's investigation exclude this tunnel system that has openings to both East Kuyaha and Kalpakalua? To have included that water tunnel system would criminalize EMI and also self-incriminate the DLNR, who has been protecting their interests. It probably would result in a class action lawsuit and settlements for those that were affected by the March 2021 flood, exposed to the possibility of many underground water tunnel networks throughout Maui that are unknown to the public, potentially result in institutional changes, federal oversight of the DLNR, and enforcement of the state water code, which DLNR is supposed to be doing as its fiduciary duties, but they aren't. Where does this all leave us with our LCA and our kuleana water rights? Per DLNR's investigation on my complaint, they identified the historic use of the Land Commission Award to Maitutunalopi having house sites and Po'alima, the Taro Patch, and they pulled the Mahele records themselves. It affirmed our right to perpetuate our cultural practice as lineal descendants to the LCA. DLNR claimed to have used the county records to determine that NP East B LLC, which is another subsidiary of Mahipono, to be the sole owner of the property, yet they privileged the response given by their lawyer while simultaneously stating that land ownership is outside of the jurisdiction of the commission. They further went on to acknowledge that my heirship at Tunalopi and the Land Commission Award may be authentic, yet made a determination that MP East B LLC supposedly being the landowner. They went beyond their jurisdiction by making a landowner determination as if they are a court or a judge, which they are not. They further went to state that continued use of water that may be available from East Kuyaha Stream is subject to regulation by the Commission and requires filing and approval of a stream diversion permit application. So they're regulating the use of water to the LCA, which they themselves acknowledge the records, the Mahele records, that it's there. And on top of that, we as the heirs, we don't need a record or a permit to access the water, and that's the state law. So they're not following the law. It gets more interesting. On the county tax property report, which pertains to MP East B LLC's supposed claim of land ownership, the Land Court Application 960, Map 2, Section C, which I briefly mentioned earlier, is referenced in the legal information section. This set of records from the 1930s, which I obtained from the Land Court, had not only revealed much of the fraudulent history A&B and EMI were hiding behind, such as all expired water lease, but also that their own fabricated title actually inadvertently protected the claim we as heirs of Nolopi have to our Land Commission Award. Not to mention, the county records identify that their fabricated title, created in 1934 by the Land Court, was then deregistered in 2018. This had already been disclosed to us by a land surveyor within a month of our repatriation to the LCA, so we knew the whole time they didn't have a title. Our Land Commission Award and royal patent remains in perpetuity, and we as the heirs of Nolopi still remain on our land perpetuating our kuleana rights. Under state law, DLNR claims to have jurisdiction over the streams. Nothing has stopped them from traveling up the dry riverbeds to fulfill their fiduciary duties to enforce the state water code. They just aren't doing it. I have basically taken it upon myself to do their job and do the investigation on them. It has been a process of building a major water rights case that will not just impact my family alone, but many families who share the same kuleana water rights to that same stream in East Kuyaha. I also have strong visions for the future of many families beyond Maiahupua'a throughout Maui and throughout our islands in the fight for asserting their kuleana rights. Despite going into the 4th year in this battle for our water to return back to our LCA, navigating the whole messy bureaucratic process has been very key. It has exposed so much about the cover-ups that occurred and continue to occur throughout our islands by the state. For my family, the concept of holding onto our land with the refusal to be displaced is our daily life, and it is what I would like to impart to others. We wake up and go to sleep in the front line. We farm in the front line. For us as Kānaka Maoli, Wai is the water and Wailua is the spirit. We know the water will return one day, one way or another, and for my family, that's what keeps us going. These corporations, with the collaboration of a corrupt government, attempt to recycle the same old tactics of diverting stream water, attempting to push us off our lands, as was done to many of our ancestors. But we are much more clever today and will not allow what was done to our ancestors to be done to us or those to come after us. Our land has been rediscovered, and the invasive cover-ups have been uncovered.
Aloha o Lani Cupchoy, ko'i noa, noa Robert Cupchoy, mai Maui, Waihihi, mai au, Oje, Yi, Chongo Chon, Jaji Tuwali. Soy hija de la Guevara de Baja California, México, de la Mexica Juan Mudecha, ni Matzladia, Francisco Guevara, Juan María Zúñiga, no Matlaki, Ile, Pimentel, Lati, Africa. And what I just said in my native languages is, hello, my name is Lani Cupchoy. I am from the family of Robert Cupchoy from Maui, Hawaii. I also come from the Chiang family of China. I am the daughter of Eva Guevara from Baja California, Mexico. I am Mexica and Purepecha, the granddaughter of Francisco Guevara and Maria Zuniga. I descend from the Pimentel family from Africa, and I honor all of my lineages: Kānaka Maoli, Chinese, Mexicana, Afro-Mexica, and Lineage. I am a public historian, activista, filmmaker, professor of Chicano Latino Studies at California State University at Los Angeles. And I'd like to start out by saying that I'm what they call Kānaka Maoli in diaspora. And what that means is I was born and raised in LA, and my father was born in the island of Maui, when Hawaii was technically still a territory. My grandfather was born in Hawaii when it was still a kingdom. I am the great-granddaughter of Lani Cupchoy, and you can see the lineages on this screen right here, descendant of Mene, and then we go all the way back to ʻāina. ʻāina is like our original ancestor. That is my how my kuleana, my genealogy, and what I consider my responsibility. Like our relatives on Maui in the cases that you heard earlier, we too are facing the afterlives of dispossession. But mine is a quiet kind. No police, no bulldozers, just paper, probate, and silence. And that's what I'm going to share today. It's not just about documentation. It's the story of how our family land in Hilo on the Big Island of Hawaii, so we're talking 65 acres awarded under Land Commission Grant 2149, how it was slowly fractured over time through colonial law, predatory leasing, and bureaucratic erasure, and how we are building a case for truth and return. Land Commission Award 2149 was granted to Hawaiian and Pequot in the mid-19th century during the Kingdom of Hawaii. It was awarded, legally recognized as a royal patent. It was surveyed, and so I have all of my ancestors going back to Hawaiian's daughter, Kāwaloa. She married somebody named David Kamai, and I'm going to mention his name a little bit more, right? Because we're going to talk about ancestors and responsibilities in our family and how that kind of transfers. But in the end of it, it eventually transferred to my great-grandmother, Amoy. And so the land was technically supposed to stay in our family through inheritance. But what was granted by the kingdom became vulnerable under the shift to U.S. territorial law. And this land was supposed to stay in our family, pass through generations as our inheritance, but that's not really what happened. In the 1880s, my ancestor, David Kamai, began leasing portions of the ancestral lands to nearby sugar companies, including Onomea and Honomu. For example, in 1886, David Kamai leased a portion to Onomea Sugar Company for 5 years, $4 per acre, but this lease included a clause. If lease payments were missed for 30 days, the agreement could be terminated and Kamai could reclaim the land. So someone would say, okay, well that's kind of protecting, your ancestors. But here's the deeper issue. These sugar companies were paying property taxes. They were holding the documents. And so under territorial systems, what I've discovered is that paying taxes over time became a tool to later claim ownership, especially if Native families were not able to enforce their legal rights. And unfortunately, that was a very common case throughout Hawaii. So what began as a lease became a slow process of legal separation, not all at once, but through paperwork, payment systems, and predatory advantage. So by the late 1800s, with sugar companies at the center of it, these corporations were not just leasing land. They were embedding themselves deeply in law and land governance to facilitate permanent acquisition. In 1896, my ancestor, David Kamai, for example, he sold 7 acres to Onomea Sugar Company for $400, so around $57 per acre. Earlier in 1880, he decided to lease 24 acres. He actually sold it to Honomu Sugar Company for $15 an acre. Now, some might think, well, these were not really fair market values. They were actually really what we call sales under pressure. And we know this because comparative research shows that agricultural lands elsewhere were selling for significantly higher prices at the time, especially in more competitive or developed areas. So these undervalued sales were part of a larger pattern. Native landowners were often coerced into selling under legal, economic, and linguistic barriers. I do want to pause for a second and say that this was one of the other ways that we're going to talk about in panel 2 is you had some of these sugar companies that were claiming Native Hawaiians had leprosy, because there was a leprosy epidemic happening at the time. Then they would, be tested, they weren't in their land, and then companies would just come in and occupy, right? And that we had some cases here, right, with Lala's case. So, one deed even includes the language that the land was transferred with, quote, all the blessings and resources to their heirs forever. A heartbreaking contradiction, actually, because the land was permanently lost in my family's case. So, this pattern played out across Hawaii. Long leases became strategic acquisitions over time. Land changed hands, not by force, but through legal pressure, tax manipulation, and unequal systems that dispossessed families like mine. By 1911, my great aunt, Lani Cupchoy, appears in land records under land patent number 7150. Now this is significant because what happens here for us is it became something called a special homestead agreement that was issued by the U.S. territorial government. So what had happened is we started with an LCA, but then somehow the government ended up changing it into something else. And this is key because it raises this crucial question. Why would a direct descendant of Kahu'aina's land, originally an heir, have to repurchase or purchase family land through an actual homestead program? That's just something to kind of reflect and think about. But it's definitely a red flag because it signals that the inheritance line was either disrupted or erased from the system, forcing my Auntie Lani to re-enter her own land through settler law. And this was not a gift, it was a workaround. It was a quiet form of dispossession. I also want to talk about one of several churches here that you see was built across our family's 65 acres. It was a former Mormon church, no longer in use, the structure still stands, but it's a visible reminder of how ʻāina was acquired, repurposed, and sold without consultation or return. And so it's just a quiet monument to occupation and the way in which spiritual spaces were claimed in ways that erased those who belonged there first. It's also sitting on Native history. I'm going to speed it up a little bit because I think lunch is almost ready, so we're going to get through there. So when Lani Kama passed away in 1917, her estate became probated in 1918, in 1923, and then my great-grandma, my tutu Amoy, was actually named an heir. And then from there, it's supposed to continue and go to my grandfather, then my dad, and myself. But what ends up happening is that even with fragmented records and legal erasures, the truth remains that this land was entrusted to our kupuna and that the kuleana has been passed on through each generation. But the interesting thing is that, although we believe we don't really claim land or own the claiming of the land, right, we descend from it. The paper trail, however, fragmented, cannot erase blood. And with that descent comes a responsibility. So today, the original 65 land acres talk about what it looks like today. So Kahu'aina and Pequot no longer exists as one land. It's been fragmented into 22 separate TMKs. What does that mean? That means 22 different families own these different parcels, I guess we could say, right, sections. They've now been divided families, trusts, corporations, and institutions. There's a chocolate farm, botanical garden, multiple churches. They all sit on top of what was originally ancestral land to my family. In the 1970s, let's complicate it a little bit more. The Hilo Council decided to rezone and shift the land into agricultural use. And that was an easier way to go ahead and open it up for corporations to build, right? So it lowered taxes, it created fewer restrictions to non-family buyers. And so what you're seeing here in this map is that it documents the slow erasure of our connection through leases, lawsuits, and legal maneuvers that wrote my family's story out. This is a systemic dispossession visible in the archives, in the landscape, and in the absence of our names. So where are we at today? Throughout my kuleana journey, I've been doing something incredibly difficult, uncovering truth and trauma across generations. I've had to piece together a legacy through fragmented records, colonial, state, coding through multiple languages, and yes, 1800s colonial writing is a language in itself, legal language, erased names, and shifting legal systems. Across the original 65 acres, our ohana buried generations of loved ones. These were not always formal cemeteries, but they were sacred resting places, part of the living landscape of our family. And over time, as the land was carved into TMKs and rezoned in the 1970s, that knowledge was severed. And today, many of those burials are inaccessible, fenced off, paved over, or hidden beneath new ownership deeds that I don't even have access to, or any of my family. So some of us can't even visit, care for, or even locate some of these graves. It's not only a cultural loss, it's a spiritual wound. These kupuna, these ancestors were part of the land's genealogy, and their erasure reflects the deep violence of settler-colonial extraction and systemic displacement. And this is where I enter the story. One of the moments that changed everything for me was when I came across a quiet title lawsuit from the 1980s. It had been filed against my great auntie Lani and all of her heirs and descendants. And I put that in quotes, all of her heirs and descendants. I was just a little girl then, growing up away from the big island of Hawaiian. I had no idea I was an heir. I had no idea that someone had filed to take away my rights. And that realization sparked something in me, because that lawsuit was not just paperwork. It was a legal strategy, a deliberate effort to erase my family from our land. And once you see that pattern, you can never unsee it. And this is not just about my family. This is about the collective, the lahui. And these tactics were used across Hawaii. And now we're pushing back by tracing title, yes, rebuilding genealogy, digging through probate, naming the pattern. So to all of our Indigenous relatives that are here in this room, you know and have experienced these tactics as well, right? To the lawyers in this room, the attorneys, the title chain may be fractured, but it is not broken, and we need your support to support our cases like this. To our allies in the room, now is the time to stand for restitution and not just recognition. And so my ancestors never gave up this land. They were dispossessed by law and by design. But the land remembers, and I, for one, am listening. Thank you.
So, can everybody hear me? I'm going to wrap it up by talking about what we're doing now in response to all of these issues. The first thing that we're doing is we're looking at potential quiet title lawsuits, and that involves us, as Lani has done, and as everybody here has also started to do or gotten really deep into, tracing the chain of title from the Lani Commission Award to the present day. I actually started to do that for them by going down to Bureau of Conveyances, pulling documents, trying to piece it together, and then quickly realized that I don't know everything about the process, so we're going to probably have to hire somebody professionally. And I also spoke to an attorney who does quiet title work in Hawaii, on the Big Island specifically. He said, you really need to hire a company to do a title report, so that way you can find out, where all the holes are, but also find out who all the defendants are in a case like that. The caveat to that is it's really expensive, especially when you're looking at, for example, Lani's case where it's 65 acres and you have 22 new landowners. I think the estimate that we got was about $20,000 for one land commission award, and we're dealing with multiple folks with multiple land commission awards, so that complicates things because it's just really expensive to even get the whole process started. But we're calling around in Hawaii trying to figure out, try to compare prices and companies to each other. Beyond just a quiet title, though, there are other layers and avenues of law to explore. So, like with Kāne Aliʻi, he's going for CIPR, Division of Land and Natural Resources, and they have like a declaratory relief route where you can file a petition with them. Basically, it might not be the best route because you're asking the people who are corrupt and violating their own laws to then determine whether or not they're corrupt and violating their own laws. So there's also luckily declaratory relief in the circuit court, so you can sue them in the court system. Hopefully the judge would see that. there's also other areas of law that you could try to crack into. So I keep going back to Kāne Aliʻi, where I think they're trying to build a fire station on some of his other ancestral lands, and they got federal funding for that. And so we're looking into whether or not we can challenge the environmental assessment that they had to complete to comply with federal law to construct that thing in the first place, because who knows, maybe we could challenge the adequacy of that, where they're not looking at all of the environmental effects of building such a large facility. You're also looking at preservation issues, right? Like whether it's state preservation or even federal under like NAGPRA and the National Historic Preservation Act, where we have ancestors buried on these lands, right? And they're coming in and trying to pave it over and build housing developments. So like that's another area of law to look into. So we're looking at quiet title as a means to get the land back, but we're also looking at these other areas of law to try to stave off whatever projects they're trying to do before we can get the land back, because then things get complicated, right? Where if we do win quiet title, what the heck happens next? And does that involve kicking people off or charging them rent, that kind of thing? So, but yeah, we're in the trying to figure out where the holes in the title are to then bring a quiet title suit, hopefully successfully. And the thing that's holding that up is the cost, right? So, yeah, it's kind of an update.
Donate.
All right, let's go around the floor. And before we get them on the way, just want to give a few minutes in case anybody had any Q&A. Yeah, just raise your hand out. I'll move the mic. Just make sure you speak loud so our live streamers can hear the questions.
Ni kisa nagkasta mismo ako bigyan nito mas manakisi nito mas koterikin. My name is traditionally called Migwen. My name is Larry. I'm a practitioner first, and so one thing that I want to say before I even say anything that I really want to say to you is that I've been through this work with my tribe. So the first thing that I want to say to you all is take time for yourself first, okay? Because this work can make you physically ill. I became physically ill while doing this whole process for my tribe, because it's mentally draining, it's emotionally draining, it's physically draining, but most importantly, also it's spiritually draining. And our spirit is really what keeps us being able to have the resiliency to fight to do this work. So once the spirit becomes damaged, you start to become physically ill. It starts to affect your immune system. So I wanted to share that first. Second of all, there's two processes that I used at one point. And none of the American processes ever really worked for us as tribal or indigenous. But there was a process called the UPR, which is a Universal Periodic Review. And that was something that I submitted to the United States and to the United Nations, just as a periodic review about the continued desecration and the human rights abuse that my tribe and my family were having experience with due to the land, due to the rights, the identity, and so on and so forth. Then there was also something that I submitted, which was called a precautionary measure. And so I'm not sure some of the lawyers in the room here probably know about it. Watson probably knows about the precautionary measures. It's through the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. And it may or may not be supportive. I can't say, because again, we're dealing with a system that doesn't really work. Obviously, you guys see what's going on in the world. But document, so that when an issue really arises and you find yourselves in the court, you can at least pull it up and say, Your Honor, look, this is what we've done as a precautionary measure. And so this was kind of like a public and constructive notice that this is happening, and we send it to the right people. And so I just want to say that, again, protect your spirit and your health while doing this work. I know it's like you've been through it, still going through it, but you have to protect it or you will become ill.
Any other questions for our group?
Mahalo for this presentation. Really appreciate it. I was just wondering if you folks could share, is there any other reading material that you recommend? I think a lot of people in the room may not be familiar with the overthrow of Hawaiʻi and may want to educate themselves on it further. So wondering if you have any recommendations, maybe podcasts, books, media that we could consume to learn more. Thank you.
So first of all, I want to commend you all. Second topic, thank you for coming here to share your story with this audience here. Because we so often, I think that's a large part of our experience with colonization, you know, we have to address the issues and the challenges that we're facing. I was just hoping, and I think you touched on it a little bit, but I just want to bring some specific attention to it. Just something about this whole process that's been encouraging or motivating for you, whatever that sort of aspect is. And I think this speaks to Mama Tuck's point, you know, making sure that our spirits are protected and enlivened. Because we're all going through it in some form or fashion dealing with this American colonial system. And we have to find that kind of thing that helps us to get up every day and keep doing it. So if anyone out there would be willing to just share something that is like, yeah, this is why I'm doing this. And it might be family, it might be something deeper, but just something positive to feed everyone's spirit. Once again, Dr. Trish, thank you very much.
Thank you. For the first question, Dr. David Kianasai's The American Occupation of the Hawaiian Kingdom is a good basis. You can also read Dr. Kehalani Ko'onui's book, I think Paradoxes of Hawaiian Sovereignty. Those are two very different approaches to the Hawaiian Kingdom and sovereignty, but really important vital texts. I'm not on social media, so I'm sorry I can't give you that portion. But for the second question, you know, to be honest, it's y'all. Like, we in the islands look towards our siblings, BIPOC, our Lahui here, our diaspora folks. Your folks' struggle has been for centuries, and we learn every day, and hope to learn more at this conference from you folks. So for me, alongside my ancestors, my parents, and my ohana, my family, it's seeing all of you doing what you're doing. It inspires us. It gives us the air, the breath of life to be able to continue to do what we have to do. So, solidarity forever. Mahalo. Anyone else want to?
Oh, we have a hard one.
A very good resource. So we have an article that came out called Legacy of the Land, Reclaiming Hawaiian kuleana Land Rights. It's actually about these cases that you see up here, except for mine, right? But you can find that in Ethnic Studies Pedagogies.
I just wanted to mention real quick, and you guys notice I read mostly everything because I'm not a speaker like these guys are, but I am a mama, I am a grandma, I'm a tutu, but I like to talk a little bit. So like what you were saying about taking care of ourselves, it is very important. Self-care is a big part in this journey in activism, and I've learned that. I also work in the school system with mental health, and so I understand that part, and it's always being able to reflect a lot and in a space that you feel safe to do. So I like to go to nature. Nature always listens to me. So being a part of nature and even speaking to nature and knowing that whatever you say, you're never going to be judged for, right? And that's my self-care, but also I wanted to extend something also. And I realized that coming here to this conference. So Leslie mentioned one of our ʻāina had gotten sick, yeah? And he's an activist. He's hard-headed, meaning like he's gonna try his best. He even wanted to be on Zoom, but he's in the hospital. So and he wants to do this work, but also to know that he has to take care of himself. It's also a self reflection of, you know, time to think about all of this. But I wanted to mention the part about how your ancestors take care of us when we come here. And I wanted to extend that to you, how grateful we are, because it was through your ancestors that this hard-headed man who continues to be active had to be still. And they were the ones I feel gave him that time and that time to give that time to do self-care, to take a look at things for a little bit and to take care of himself. And that is through your ancestors. And I pay respect to your ancestors here in all means because you are going to be part of, or you are part of our ancestors. And what a blessing it is to be able to testify to witnesses here at this conference of how we take care of each other, right? As Indigenous, that we can rely upon each other. We know our stories. We know what the fight is like. We know how it feels. And because of that, we can come together and we can collaborate and we can discuss and we can talk to one another to heal ourselves. And that's what it's all about, is to be able to come together and heal ourselves. And that's what self-care is about. So mahalo for that.
Thank you. So let's give one more round of applause to our panel. All the work we have to do. So wish us luck. We have a long road ahead of us. But it ain't rough, it ain't right. So, all right, so we're going to take a break. Lunch is served.